show, I think every year since he's been here, which dates him back to 2021. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I'm in year 5 if my math is accurate. So.
I know, but who's counting, so to speak?
Right.
But Ken's role and is as Purdue's deputy athletic director is many pronged. Part of it is fan experience, revenues, and trying to find a way to navigate this world, the new world of college athletics, and some of the things that we'll hit on, certainly rev share, NIL, et cetera. But let's start with the fan experience part, because come tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 in Ross-Ade Stadium, long before that, actually, from the fan experience standpoint. But it's going to be a big day in West Lafayette when USC comes to town.
Yeah, I think we've all circulated very recently. Somebody posted the stat that USC hasn't won in the Eastern time zone since 2012.
Yeah.
And then all of us with our Indiana geography rules were like, is South Bend in the Eastern time zone or the Central time? I can't remember. But either way, we're excited about it. Everything since Coach Odom has been hired has been really exciting around here. And we had, we've been so pleased with the turnout of our fans the first 2 weeks of the season, and we're going to have another incredible turnout Saturday. But we had actually, we did a little bit of digging just to give some context on like how do we stack from an objectivity standpoint in fan attendance. So we looked up over the last decade, teams, how many times has a Power 4/5 team had 2 or fewer wins? And then there were 23 instances of that. The following season's home opener, what was the attendance from a percentage of capacity standpoint? And we were trying to see for our Ball State game, how do we stack in those terms? So 23 times that has happened. And if you rank those for percentage of capacity, our Ball State attendance was 6th on that list out of 23, which we were very pleased with. But if you take out 2 examples where the home opener was against Alabama and the other one against Louisville hosting Notre Dame, we would have been in the top 4. And so what that says about what it means to be a Purdue person, our supporters, our John Purdue Club members, and the excitement about Coach Odom, his experience, his toughness, his mentality just speaks volumes about the start we're off on. If he were sitting here, he'd say we still have a long ways to go. And one of my favorite things that Coach Odom has said several times, he does not take for granted how hard it is to win. Yeah. And how important it is, and that he takes none of it for granted. But I think our fans take that seriously too. So, we just have so much energy and excitement going into Saturday, and we're excited to see now a real test where both teams have a full rev share salary to work with. So, how's that going to look? So,
yeah, and I think it was, I don't know what the final number was, but over 42,000 season tickets. Is that right? Including students. It was
correct.
Impressive. And you've been around college athletics for a while, and you see that, and there's a lot of theories out there, and certainly one that you talk about and you live every day, that the fan support that Purdue's enjoyed has been good. But other things that are interesting, obviously this year is even more important, more relevant in some ways, that Notre Dame wasn't on the schedule this year at home, and that certainly drove some things last year.
Correct.
But
yep.
My point is that it is impressive that the fan base, I think the NCAA tournament, the Final Four effect had a good feeling about Purdue athletics, all that. But how do you've seen it in a lot of different places. How do you attribute? I mean, yes, you've got great loyal fans, but it's been impressive to be able to have those numbers.
I think there's something that's just really special about being associated with Purdue. I think there is a Midwestern mindset of commitment and loyalty that's underspoken, that a non-attention seeking willingness to support. I used to joke, I moved up here from South Carolina, and the community I lived in had an annual spring festival called Come See Me. And I used to joke, like, Southern hospitality is driven by, there's a lot of hospitality, but there's a little bit of like, hey, see what I did? Yeah. And I think, this is especially true with Purdue people. They support at a massively deep philanthropic and committed level, but don't want to be celebrated, don't want to be talked about, don't want to be seen. They just want to be behind the scenes helping. And then when the team shows up, they want to be there as well. But to your question, yeah, I mean, obviously you cannot give enough credit to the work, the growth of Matt's 20 years as the head coach in men's basketball program, building off what Coach Katie did and getting to the Final Four. And you also just like, I think that impacts everything throughout the department. And the pride in, our volleyball program is always ranked, our wrestling program is always ranked, and our football program, it just, there's this belief that we're still within reach of elite competitive excellence. And then I think, the last piece to that, our fans understand that our students are committed to being academically excellent as well. Mike, in a recent, he's been on his recent speaking engagements lately, reminding folks that this last year was our highest academic GPA on record to date this last spring semester. And coming into the fall, our student athletes have never been more committed to their academic achievement as well. So our fans can be proud of the student athletes that they're supporting day in and day out.
Yeah, I think it could be, I've asked several people that are close to being in your shoes, or certainly you work with, about that secret sauce of being competitive. And yet, it does present a challenge. I mean, with football, you bring in a lot of new people. Now there are a lot of graduate transfers in there. There are a lot of guys that have players, student athletes that have been other places and have academic background. But that's a huge challenge for your academic team to be able to get all that together. Take kids that where I agree with you, maybe because I'm a Purdue graduate, but we do take academics seriously here, and it's an important part of academic rigor, I should say. That is a challenge, though, for departments to be able to assimilate when you have large numbers coming in, as Coach Barry Odom brought in this past year.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I don't want to miss in that statement is when you talk about other schools, we know, look at us and are envious. I think there are a number of categories where that is true. One of the biggest is our student attendance, the engagement of our student body at large, and support for our athletic department, which I think is an indicator of our general fan base at large. I mean, we sell out of our student tickets to football, men's basketball, and volleyball with regularity. We have about 10,000 seats of our 61,000 seat stadium committed to our students. They're always there. And you think about, we have an enrollment of just over 50,000. So roughly a fifth of our student body at large is at every football game. And then Mackey Arena, we give a third of that arena to our students. We pass on a lot of really, really high dollar revenue opportunities by doing that. But it has been our belief, and it will always be our belief, that the support of our fan base is so deeply rooted in what it meant to be a student here when our graduates were on campus getting to experience their sporting events. And it's our belief that today's students who understand how incredible it is to be a part of our game day environment 20 years from now will have sewed into their heart and soul what it means to be a Boilermaker.
Yeah. And bucking the trend, because some of the trend nationally has been, lack of student participation in attending games. Purdue is a little bit of an anomaly in that role, and that's a challenge. I mean, today's world, that's a huge challenge, because you've got a lot of things to compete with that don't, there's a lot of options for the fans in terms of not only just watching, but also taking in your games and your competitions, whether they're watching it on a media or in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, when you look in that situation, very much so. Let's talk a little rev share and NIL, and maybe the bane of your existence. I think you guys have done again, kind of like what Barry Odom says. That's one thing I like about Barry is I'm going to play within the rules. These are the rules, and we're going to maximize the best we can. And of course, paraphrasing what Barry has said a couple times already this year. But talk about where you think you are. Obviously, rev share now is up and running. How that's going, and where Purdue sits in the marketplace of competitiveness as this continues to evolve.
Yeah, it's funny you refer to it as the bane of my or our existence, and I don't think that's entirely true.
Yeah,
it's like anything. The more complicated it is for everyone, the greater opportunities you have if you're smart, intelligent, and you apply a really, really advanced work ethic. And so, like, don't know, for those of you tracking the signal that there's potentially movement to a single football transfer portal, and that's likely going to happen in January. Just in a meeting with Tiff and with Brandon Lee and Ethan Baxter, our GM and assistant GM for football, and just tell them, like, good Lord, man, you guys, the amount of work you're going to have to do to turn over contracts inside of that tiny little window during the transfer portal, like, that's a lot of work, but they love it, and I would say that for everybody. We understand that the work ethic necessary to be elite and to execute. That means that sometimes there is around the clock work and narrow windows of time to stay on top and continue the growth that our football program has set. But yeah, I mean, looking back at just the NIL era and rev share, we're constantly internally having discussions like, all right, how do we grade ourselves? And I vividly remember I was still pretty new here, and back when NIL first got approved, and we had a chance at a basketball transfer student athlete. We ended up missing out to an ACC school. I think everybody vividly remembers that.
Yeah.
And I think we took a little criticism for that, but I still to this day stand by the numbers that people were hearing still were inflated. Now the numbers that this specific student athlete got were big, but they weren't as big as a lot of people were saying, number one. And number two, that institution was penalized by the NCAA for how they went about approaching and recruiting and using NIL to recruit that year, which we said out loud we refused to do because it was against the rules. And we still stand by, we built up our NIL strategy within the rules. And if Zach Edey would tell you, if it were not for the steps that we took for NIL, he probably would have gone into the NBA draft a year earlier.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, if it were not for the steps that we took, we would not have the basketball roster that we have right now, and we would not have the football roster that we have right now, which is still in development. You can't flip it overnight, but it's taken a big step forward. And then you add Coach Odom's commitment to discipline. Us being, what are we, the least penalized team in the Big Ten, at least after 2 weeks. That shows maturity, and that shows wisdom, and that shows commitment to the right things that more and more elite talented athletes are going to be a part of. Because at Purdue, we've said since the beginning, we're never going to be the highest bidder for any student athlete.
Yeah.
We're going to sell you what it means to be a Purdue student for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
We're going to be in the game from a financial standpoint, and we're going to be in the game from what the rules say always. But we're never going to step over the line and risk what potentially happened in the situation you're there. So, we went through the NIL era. We had our collective, which was a complicated but really important chapter of Purdue's history. It was necessary. The Boilermaker Alliance was necessary to help get Purdue to the Final Four in Phoenix. Coach Payne will be the first to tell you that. And now, as we turn the page into the rev share era, we're fully participating revenue share. I think, I don't know how to convey this metric, but I think if you ask the Big Ten, when they're getting calls circulated about which schools to connect with because they're out ahead of everyone else, we're often listed in the top 2 or 3 of the entire conference. We get a ton of calls from other schools about our strategies and approach, especially with international student athletes. We've been in a really, really strong position. We're happy with it. And, we this last off season, we got all the people we wanted to land, so to speak, and we kept the ones we wanted to keep. And so now moving forward, we're fully participating in rev share, the new sort of chapter that everyone is talking about. I was just talking to my counterpart in another Big Ten school yesterday. We're talking about how are you now handling what is permissibly pursuable in true, genuine, bona fide NIL endorsement opportunities. Our approach to that, we just hired a brand new full-time dedicated NIL human being. His name's Daniel Picchioski, just started on Monday of this week. And so you've got we have, for those familiar with Learfield, it's our Purdue Sports Properties, handles all of our sponsorship opportunities. And that's when a company wants to be visible in your stadium, in your arena, and they pay for those marketing assets. That team is now having conversations as well. How would you like a student athlete to help promote the multimedia right assets that you've acquired that's in our menu of opportunities? Well, beyond that, there are going to be companies, and if anyone's listening right now who is a company who has ever thought about having a Purdue student athlete promote their business, we have somebody on staff whose job it is to sit down, talk to you, and have a conversation about how the student athlete can permissibly within the rules have promote your business in exchange for compensation. We have an understanding of how the clearinghouse works so that we know we can get it passed inside of a range of compensation that's reasonable and within market range, and it helps our student athletes above and beyond the rev share. And again, that's while you can't use it in recruiting promising NIL, you can help future student athletes understand what the opportunities look like should they come here to Purdue and be some of our better performers. So it's created a lot of work, a lot of exciting work, a lot of room for really creative outside the box thinking. We've got a few, random irons in the fire that hopefully we'll be able to talk about in the next 6 months that are really unique. And we're really happy with where we're at. So globally, and I think football's taken steps forward. And when everybody sees, the AP preseason rankings for men's basketball this year, I think it'll be an acknowledgement to the fact that in this last sort of uncapped year heading into rev share, we've been on the right side of it, and we're going to continue to be on the right side of it.
You look at that and you look at it from a true marketing and perspective, or a market perspective. And Purdue, if you don't take a critical view or understand all of it, you say, well, Purdue sits in one of the smallest markets in the Big Ten, therefore it's going to have a huge problem in the world of NIL or opportunities. Why? And some of the things you just explain that, but unique and being able to even the playing field. I mean, you would think Columbus, Ohio, you've got 47 car dealerships, you've got all this and that and all these opportunities. What is that niche that and again, some of the things you mentioned that may be coming up in the next 6 months, but the things that can make Purdue competitive long term in that situation?
Well, I don't know that I would call it a niche. I think every student athlete is a specific human being who has interests and has desires. And I think it's reported on, but it's worth being said. Acknowledging that each sport is different. Yeah. Football's pressure points and basketball's pressure points are very, very different. Football, there's so many more human beings that are going to be discussed with, negotiated with, and so you probably, by nature of the sport, have a lot more discussions that lean toward the transactional nature. But we get ahead on student athletes who don't want to get zero, that they know that they have some market value, but also understand that what they develop and understand from a student educational experience and what opportunities they're set up for the rest of their lives, we get ahead when that's what those students care about. I mean, there's, Matt, Coach Painter famously, sells what it means to be at Purdue. And famously, we have a financial structure where if you're just an incoming freshman who appears really, really talented, you're not just going to get more money because you've appeared really, really talented. Matt always says he's going to wait and see how guys perform. How are you when the red light is on? You're on the court. It's game time. Who's stepping up? Who's executing? And it's helped us. But what that means is that sometimes, there are going to be some student athletes say, well, I can command more money at a different school. And Matt has had no problem saying, awesome. I truly wish you the best. And Coach Odom has had several examples like that already before we even kicked off this year, of student athletes, proclaiming the opportunity to get paid more elsewhere, and him saying, gosh, that sounds really exciting for you. I wish you the best. Now, a lot of those cases, said student comes back and says, it wasn't exactly that way. So that's the other thing that we get caught up in, is having to remain. It's so important that we know what we stand for, because people and agents throw around numbers like you wouldn't believe and claim that other schools have made a commitment that's real. Using subjective language you can use the word commitment when that other school, if you ask them, would say, I haven't even talked to that kid yet. Yeah. It's that's the other complex web of this that we try not to get sucked into. But I guess to answer your question, without it being too overly simplified, knowing what we stand for is probably our greatest strength. Yeah. And that we're never going to put Purdue in an urban environment, but urban environments have professional sport competitive problems as well. I think, are what we stand for and what we've stood for a very, very long time. We're going to continue to stand for, which means that's what's going to help us bring Purdue people to Purdue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, competitive. Knowing who you are, I think, is absolutely a must in this world, and being confident enough in who you are. And I think that's something even days before your time. I think Purdue's been pretty good at that, and
Yeah, yeah.
fundamental. It's a fundamental part of the university. It is
And
interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I know I interrupted, but I think too, it's worth saying, like, you know, in our following or fan base, I think we have the overwhelming majority of our fan base loves that we win the right way.
Yeah.
There are some, and I don't blame them, who, you know, you'll hear occasional phrases like, "Oh, we're going to clutch our pearls and watch everyone else pass us by because we refuse to get in the game." And I think that you know, I don't blame people for wanting to be competitive. We want to win. Like, we don't keep score just for the heck of it. We're here to see the score be to our favor every game, but not at the expense of the things that matter most. And that's, you know, at the end of the day, I think for a lot of our coaches, what that builds in is an environment where you're not necessarily competing with others every day. You're competing against yourself. Yeah. You're standing up every day saying, today was I the absolute best version of were we the absolute best version of ourselves? And so, you know, it does make for some hard decisions, but at the end of the day, it's part of the reason I love working here, is because I get to work around people who know who they are, head coaches who know who they are, what they stand for, and so you can just stand up taller every day as you make decisions. And if the ones that don't go your way, you turn the page and know you did it the right way, and you're ready to do it again the next day.
Yes, you had a head on the pillow example. You can do that well. All right, and with that PhD in education, that you've got to be able to you see the future. That's part of your makeup. But no, I mean, looking back at the lens of this, when you're still before Medicare age, and you look at this 15 years from now or whatever that would be, and you say this era ends up being a really good thing for the college student athlete experience because they have the opportunity to make money. Do you think that there's still a lot to work through, but do you think this can end up being a true turning point that can be a very, very positive thing for the world of college athletics?
Well, I mean, I guess I'd start by saying, let's not confuse, you know, there's a difference between seeing the future and at least being able to see what can't be seen in the future. Yeah. You know, I mean, the crystal ball questions are always relevant and valid, because we've got to make decisions based on where we think the world is going to be sitting 3 months, 3 years, 13 years from now. For us, I think this was an inevitability to get to the point where we're at today. So being prepared to do it was really, really important. You know, some would say probably didn't get here soon enough, and because of that, it's still going to look broken before it looks more improved. You know, the rules structure coming out of the Collegiate Sports Commission is slowly coming out. You know, they've got people who I don't even know if they've gotten more than one paycheck yet from CSC. That are still not getting rules out fast enough. And then it's the getting of the rules out that has to happen before then you can hold someone accountable to those rules. And I think, you know, the next micro layer of this, what we'd love to see, is the first group of entities experiencing real consequences for knowingly violating the spirit of the law. That's going to take a little bit to get to, but I believe that's coming. The next layer on that, after that, I hate to say it out loud, but I think it's true, is there will be another wave of attempted, and I just use attempted because I don't know if they'll be successful or not, lawsuits. I don't think we've seen the end of the lawsuits, and lawsuits are going to test the viability of the system as it is today. So you've got to remember, the current system as it is today was blessed by a Supreme Court judge, and so that doesn't make it foolproof, but at least makes it, you know, a little more watertight. And so however those lawsuits go will kind of determine the next wave. But then I think at some point, this is not a new idea. I think a handful of the talking heads would all say you got sort of two big potential outcomes, either congressional interference or collective bargaining.
Yeah.
And those two topics both can take up an entire 90-minute podcast episode on the ins and outs of those. I know there's active movement in DC with the SCORE Act right now. It's not that in itself is not a perfect answer. It comes with opportunities and drawbacks. Everybody would love to say collective bargaining is the right answer, but which I think there is more upside in a collective bargaining fictitious future, but collective bargaining might be the most complicated thing to try to figure out how to execute. And so I always land on, I actually, Coach Odom in one of his pressers recently said something that really struck me, and I appreciated it because, we can easily get sucked into the desire to pontificate about what we think. His answer was, hand me the rules as they are today so I can follow them.
Yeah.
And, I got to, he's got a football team to coach up and he's got a game to go out and try and win. So just tell me what the rules are and I'm going to go execute those right now. And I think that's the mindset for all of us right now is, hey, this is what we understand the world will look like. So we're gonna redline it inside of these rules, and we're gonna find creative ways to put really, really highly competitive teams out there because we're in the championship business, and we have not a single doubt that we can get there in every one of our sports, especially the ones that get the most eyeballs.
Yeah, being nimble and being focused on the now. Right, people like yourself, Mike Babinski, Tiffany Grimes, on down the line. Board of trustees have to be thinking flying the jet, so to speak. But the guys that are coaching the teams have got the men and women coaching the teams have got to be focused on what they're going to do on the next possession, so to speak. All right, one last question I want to hit you, and certainly men's basketball, something that you're very, very close to. A unique situation, and it doesn't mean anything at this point because they haven't played a game yet. But maybe in the wonderful world of online gambling, they would be, or not online gaming, sports gambling, I should say. Purdue might be the odds-on favorite to win the national championship in men's basketball. In fact, they are by some, I suppose. But an interesting, and you have a very unique situation with a very mature head coach that's been through a lot of things, a staff that's mature. A team that has on the surface is mature. If we talk about opportunity, well, that situation you talked about in the ACC and the player that went down there, it began an opportunity for a guy named Braden Smith. So things have a way of working out. But put that in perspective in terms of as you watch them approach a year where the spotlight couldn't be bigger in the world of college basketball on Purdue men's basketball, what's your take on how this will go?
I love to believe sometimes that Coach would never admit it, but he secretly went back, I don't know, a decade ago when all the future sites were announced, and Indianapolis was announced as a site for the 2026 Final Four. That he was like, all right, how do I create the perfect apex of talent to get Purdue into an Indianapolis-based Final Four? And sure enough, he executed it.
Yeah.
It's I think a lot of our fans may or may not know, our most recent athletics campaign that Tim House and the John Purdue Club staff led us through. One of the benefits was to expand access to services. Like we work with a, call it a professional development, thought process, team building solution called Profile.
Right.
It's actually founded by a Purdue alum, and great friend of ours. Well, Profile started in the early days with Matt Painter in Purdue men's basketball. And again, it's not a be all end all. Matt would tell you, it's one part of the way that he evaluates his staff and whatnot. But it's and getting to see the ways that they engage with our staff and our team, it helps you understand how, in a day and age where are my minutes and where's my money, which is the prevailing, especially in basketball, I think the prevailing voices you hear, how Coach Painter has found a way to build a team of like I think we might have 14 Big Ten starters all on one roster.
Yeah.
And building a vision of something that's so greater than any individual, which is what it would mean to win a national title at Purdue. And so you have a group of guys who are taking less than they could get. Every one of the names that our fans know by heart could have left and made more money somewhere else. They could all be starters somewhere else if they're not starting this year, but they believe in something big. So it's going to be an exciting season. It's going to be I don't even think our coaches know fully how the rotation is going to work out, but at the end of the day, every time someone comes off the court, somebody just as good's coming right back on. The two new faces that our fans are going to see that we picked up, how they fit into what it means to be a Purdue person could not be more perfect. They're unselfish. They're incredibly hard workers, and they're incredibly talented. And then we've got some young faces that you go to practice more and more, and you realize, man, we've got some younger players that our fans don't even realize how much they're going to fall in love with the work ethic, the commitment of our young players. So, and then I think too, this is true. Purdue men's basketball, Coach Painter fashion. We'll have this year. We'll go into next season, hopefully after a hallmark year this year, and next season we will have 0 seniors.
Yeah.
Unless there's a transfer opportunity, building into a very senior heavy following year, which is probably going to be one that's going to get just as much hype as this one. So Matt's ability to see the future and then Matt's ability to see talent before everyone else is truly it's in another stratosphere and impossible to measure or account for. So.
Yeah, some of those names you mentioned, Chad Q. Brown, friend of the show. The most interesting part, at my age, Ken, I have to find things I'm really interested in. I'm very interested in your topic and how you're approaching it. Chad's work is when we have him on our shows, but even offline, fascinating how that works. And nobody puts it all together, it seems like, any better. Yeah, Jack Benter, Antoine West, these are guys that you may need to get to know. You'll know them some this year. You're going to know them. You're going to know them a lot down the road. And of course, Omer Mayer and Oscar Clough too, is two guys that could take Purdue to the highest level. Yeah. Ken, it is a football weekend, and you've got other things to do with your life. Fascinating conversation, and we will make sure if you missed part of this, we will put it up on YouTube as well. One thing I'm a big one, and this is not a short world. We will put the entire context, the entire interview up there, and even at 33 minutes, it's well worth your time because you'll get a really good feel of where things are and where things are going, not only at Purdue but down the road for college athletics. Ken, thanks again so much. Enjoy it. Have fun tomorrow. I know one way you'll have fun is if that scoreboard reads the right way, but no matter, it's going to be a big day in Ross-Ade Stadium.
The confidence inside the building and inside the staff could not be higher. We're really excited about this one.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks so much, Ken. All right. I want to thank our sponsors, XXX, on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. And of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. Want to thank our guests, and Ken was outstanding. So was Kelly Kitchell. So was Tom Dienhart. We appreciate all of them for making the show. We thank the good folks at WLFI, Steve Clark, Chris Collar, TJ, all the folks that make this happen. We have a lot of fun doing it, so we'll appreciate that, and we will look forward to a show next week prior to Purdue Notre Dame as we look ahead. So have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching and listening and enjoying Gold and Black Live.